At the end of the class today, we'll talk about the exam, which should be next week at the same time or somewhat like this time. I don't know. So it'll be about 2 hours or something like that, but I'll tell you about it at the end of the class. So last time we were doing some of my favorite people, Haram and Chaim Weitzman, and we saw what the problem of their situation was and where their mind was at when we were potentially 10 or 20 years from the Holocaust. And we discussed about how they perhaps really didn't have a clear feeling of what the West was like and didn't know how disastrous perhaps the situation was. Now we were looking at Weitzman when he broke down and started crying before the Peel Commission. And did not fail to complain about all the hard work he'd done and how difficult it is among the Jews and so on and so forth, and how another reminiscent, 579, a week after the vote I traveled to London 4th class because there was no 5th. Oh, poor Chaim. I went to Downing Street. I was living in Whitechapel. Oh, you were living in the poverty area. I get it. And saw there the director of the Department of African Colonies, Percy by name. And in my broken French, I tried to find out his opinion about the Uganda plan, etc., etc. Anyway, he talks about his work trying to sell shares in the Colonial Trust to Jewish families in the East. We who had to exercise Herzl's orders as his faithful servants had to rise against our master when it was Herzl or Palestine. Okay, true, but Herzl wasn't a fool. He didn't want to take Uganda, or later, as I said, the Sinai was offered. He didn't want to do that. That was an interim solution. The British didn't have anything better they could offer. But obviously he had laid the groundwork among the British to have a successful further offer. And I don't think it had anything to do with Weitzman, as I said, because that was 1904, and when the British launched their campaign into Palestine from Egypt in 1917, that's when they made the offer, plus they were anxious to get the Americans to come into the war. And they thought that that was also a good thing to issue the Balfour Declaration to ingratiate themselves to Wilson and his associate Brandeis. And we see from this text we had here how very Zionistic Brandeis was. Doesn't mean he wasn't a good American. He just felt that something could and should be done concerning the situation, and it'd be done quickly and effectively in the Herzl manner. These were all Westerners, you see, in the sense Brandeis is not Western in the sense that he comes from Europe or someplace. Again, Brandeis is a Sephardi name, so he would be an old Sephardi family originally, but he's grown up in America, and he was a labor lawyer in New York and so on, and he was very, very able. He went to the Supreme Court. So he'd be considered a Westerner, and we did read his passage we have from him. And you see this here, the apostolic devotion that the masses of Eastern European Jews had to Herzl, he felt was un-Jewish in its conception. And the means that they were going to use were not Jewish means, for its works with means which cannot be applied to our movement, calculated to grow slowly and organically. Well, yeah, that's very good, as I told you. But there wasn't time for any slow motion in this thing, as we can now with hindsight realize. So I don't blame these people, but in hindsight, they're just very unsophisticated, short-sighted, and unaware. And they're beating up one of their leaders for no reason. who happen to be clearer-sighted than they are. For instance, here, I remember having heard Nordau, we read Nordau, one of Herzl's close associates, an English novelist, saying 4 years ago, I refer to this without intention to polemicize, not much. 500,000 Jews shall go to the country of Palestine. 200,000 will fail, but 300,000 will remain in the country. I have always opposed such an attitude. It may be an heroic gesture from Germanic or Greek mythology, but it's not Jewish, you see. It's not Jewish. What do you mean it's not Jewish? Is it Jewish to be, excuse the expression, schlep along, as we say in the ghetto or something? Is it Jewish, you know, to be like Larry David or something like that, or Borat or something? Is that the only kind of Jew there is, you know? Why can't they do something in this way? You know, I mean, that's where Eisenman, I think, was not a bad person, obviously a decent person, but the wrong man for the wrong time, and we paid the price as people for that problem. Yes, 500,000 should have gone. In the Hitler period, 200,000 would not have failed; they'd have stayed, and he'd have saved 500,000 more people than they saved. So again, and this is written in 1927. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 was built on air, and a foundation had to be laid for through years of exacting work, every day, every hour of these last 10 years. When opening the newspapers, I thought, whence will the next blow come, and so on and so forth. Well, it's still coming, as you can see. Just pick up the newspapers, look at Jimmy Carter's book and other books like that, and you'll see the blows never cease. Jimmy Carter complains against the wall. What, you think Jews want to build a wall? You really think they want to build a wall? You think they want apartheid? You know, they've been forced to build a wall because of suicide bombings. Did you forget what triggered the wall? And that the wall has been, why? Because anyone could just come across with bomb belts. You know, the wall really isn't very effective. It can get a ladder and climb over it, I suppose, but it's a little bit more effective than just having it wide open for anyone who has a suicidal mentality. And that's what was happening on Jerusalem virtually weekly or sometimes daily. Suicide belts were going off in buses and so on and so forth. So they decided, unfortunately, and I lived on the West Bank, and it was a very pleasant intercourse between different cultures, but you can't have an intercourse when people are intent on suicide bombing and stuff like that, who don't value human life at all, not theirs or yours. And that's what's happening in Iraq to the Americans. There is no discussion because people don't value life at all, and they're willing to blow up like they blew up 67 people today. What for? They were just workers trying to get a job someplace. Why blow them up? Just to cause chaos. Just to make people in America think, oh, this isn't worth it. That's what it's all about. And when people have that mindset that human life is of no value whatsoever, you're in a serious problem. So yes, Mr. Carter and others, unfortunately, people are driven to do things that they don't want to do, like build walls. Nobody wants to build a wall. You have to be crazy to want to build a wall. That's just, you want a civilized relationship with different cultures. Anyway. So, but the blows do keep coming in now. It's a Holocaust conference in Iran. That the Holocaust, anti-Holocaust conference, inviting all the Nazi sympathizers and everyone else to prove that the Holocaust didn't happen. Look, I don't revel in the Holocaust. It's horrendous that any such thing should happen. But to have a conference and then to negotiate with such people and call for negotiations with such people, this is insanity. We live in a very insane world, unfortunately. And these people are going to develop nuclear weapons now. And we're going to hope that they don't to use them in an improper way. We're dreaming. You know, this is like cloud cuckoo land. So I mean, the blows keep on coming. And I hate to be a pessimist, but you know, it's he's saying it here, and we still have it. Okay, so then we have this. This is 1927. In 1936, what happened? There was an uprising in Palestine among the Arabs, fostered, as I told you, by the Mufti and others. Now, the Mufti was one of the upper-class families in Jerusalem, upper-class Arab Islamic families. And it was Hajj Amin al-Husseini, I told you that. Hajj, when you went on the Hajj. Amin al-Hussein. I don't know if you want to spell it with 2 S's or 1 S, but we'll spell it with 2 for the moment. And Yasser Arafat, as I told you last time, is a descendant of his. And they finally found the Achilles heel of the British. Protest, 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 and the British would go weak on their commitments because the British were basically, the man on the spot was not sympathetic. And well, I'll call it honestly, the British, there's a deep streak, unfortunately, of anti-Semitism running in through English society, much more even than here, and it's not so bad here, frankly. But the English, for some reason, you'd think they would be philo-Semitic. Yes, some are because of their Methodist or evangelical Baptist sort of upbringing, but that's one group of English. There are others who are not of that biblical mindset. There are British Zionists, but there are more of the other sort of people. And the man on the spot, I don't have a history book that I can assign you, but if you want a good history book for this period, it's called Crossroads Palestine by Sykes. Crossroads Palestine. I used to read it in this class, but we made this more of an intellectual class because it had to account for philosophy. By Christopher Sykes. His father made the Sykes-Picot Treaty. You say, well, what's the Sykes-Picot Treaty? Sykes-Picot Treaty was the understanding between the English and the French in the time of the First World War to divide up into spheres of influence the Middle East, which if you saw the Lawrence of Arabia movie, or read Lawrence's book. Lawrence wrote a very good book, by the way. T.E. Lawrence, this is. Seven Pillars of Wisdom. It's a work of literature as well as history. Lawrence was an Oxford boy who was a day boy. He didn't go to private school or anything like that. He lived in Oxford. And he had an accident when he was young, and his legs were kind of short. He broke his legs, a little bit like Toulouse-Lautrec, but not quite that bad. He was very, very short. Probably may have been short anyway, but he was much shorter than I think he would have been otherwise. But he was very, very brave, and he studied archaeology at Oxford, and then he was taken under the wing of the different archaeologists there, and they sent him out to northern Iraq in the 19s, not the teens, but before the teens, the period before the teens, 1900s. And he was at the Carchemish dig, and he basically was keeping an eye on the German railroad that the Germans were building a railroad for the Turks through southern Turkey and northern Iraq, and he was watching it, and then he went and did the exploration of Sinai for the British authorities before they even conquered it and so on. And then in World War I, he was in the intelligence office in Cairo, and they sent him down to foster a revolt in Mecca, a person called the Sharif of Mecca. Anyway, he covers all this in his book. And that was the father of a person called King Abdullah and King Faisal. They were two brothers. The father was called Hussein also, but that doesn't matter. And Lawrence picked Faisal as his man, and he promoted him, and they did an irregular campaign blowing up trains and stuff like that on the other side of the Jordan, and that was the other side of the British punch into Palestine. And they started this in 1916, and then the thing was the race to Damascus, and that's what the movie's all about, the race to Damascus. Lawrence gets to Damascus first, and he thinks he's going to offer the Arabs independence. But the British have already signed this Sykes-Picot Treaty with the French. So the French, Lawrence didn't know it. He made promises to the Arabs to get them to participate. Part of the broken promises that the Arabs talk about. In any case, the French came in and kicked Faisal out of the kingship in Syria. that Lawrence was going to put him in king in Syria. Well, of course, what's a Sharif of Mecca's kids got anything to do with Syria? Ultimately, when Lawrence was working for Churchill in the Foreign Office in the 1920s, they did compensate the family by letting the younger brother, Abdullah, who was less an impressive person, become king of Transjordan. Transjordan didn't exist. They cut it out of the mandate for Palestine, as I told you. It's around 1925 or so. They weren't supposed to do this according to the League of Nations. The League of Nations awarded them a mandate for Palestine. And they were supposed to, mandate meant they were to foster a situation. There were Class A mandates, Class B mandates. And I write about this in my Islamic Law in Palestine and Israel book. If you want to know all about the mandate situation, it's all in that book that I wrote back in the 70s. So, in any event, I just got a compliment on this book. One of our students went up to UC Santa Barbara and met one of the professors up there and said, you know, I love Eisenman's book about mandate Palestine and the law and so on and so forth. I wish he'd stuck to that subject. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but anyway, it was a very dull subject, but it was an interesting book. And anyway, I'm trying to summarize this quickly for you so you understand a little bit of the history. So they cut 2/3 of the mandate away and gave it to Abdullah because they were embarrassed about what happened to Faisal, but Abdullah had nothing to do with Transjordan either. And that family is still there. That's called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. It became Jordan when after 48 the army moved, it was called the Jordan Legion that was trained by British officers, moved into Palestine when the war began between the Jews and the Arabs over the partition plan from the UN in 1947 and 1948. And then the Jordanian Legion came in and took part of the country. So it was not now Transjordan, it was on both sides of the Jordan, so it became Jordan. And that lasted till the Six-Day War, 1967. So, the present king is called Abdullah, and he's the son of King Hussein, so they keep the names in the family. Why are they called Hashemites? Because Hashem is the clan of the prophet, and the pretense of the Sharif of Mecca was that he was a descendant of the prophet. So therefore, the family of the Banu Hashim are the family of the prophet, and the pretense is that we're descendants of the prophet. Yeah.
Is it Hashem slightly mean like the name?
That's Hebrew. That's Hebrew. This is Hashem, H-A-S-H-I-M, actually, originally. But as it gets into English, it becomes Hashemite, but it's nothing to do with Hashem. Hashem is what religious Jews who don't want to pronounce the name of God say the name. The name, Ha-the-Shem name. Some of them will say Elohim instead of Elohim. That's pushing it to my mind. I don't think God minds if I pronounce his name a little bit, if he even exists out there. So I think that, but it shows a certain amount of respect, or a point beyond which you don't want to go, and so on. Anyway, I got to go back to this Hashemite thing because I'm trying to fill in some pieces here for you. So you'll understand what happened in the Peel Commission here. So in these mandates, which the British illegally changed themselves and was never confirmed by international law, but everyone recognizes it, the thing that no one questions is Jordan. And Jordan just walks away with all the marbles, and nobody ever says, oh, how come Jordan's there? And they just assume that it belongs there. No, it doesn't belong there. The British created it out of whole cloth, out of the mandate, caused the Palestine problem. There probably wouldn't be a Palestine problem without Jordan. And I'm not against Jordan. It's a civilized country because the British kept control of it and trained everybody there. But you see, what's happened with the mandate is that the Palestinians have now got 2 states out of the mandate, not one. They've got 2. They've got Jordan, and now they want Palestine too. So you see, it never ceases. It becomes more demands, more demands, more demands. And the world, being basically unsophisticated as far as these things go, doesn't realize that all these things have occurred contrary to international law anyway. Well, be that as it may, the Jordanian monarchy are the biggest war profiteers. But they're nice people, so nobody blames them. They're civilized, and they don't cut people's heads off and stuff like that. But they have an absolute control there. They don't. It's a police state. In fact, when I lived on the West Bank after the '67 war, I was living in '68 to '73 in the territories and rented Arab houses. So I was doing this book on Islamic law there. The people, I got very friendly with everybody there, and they used to laugh. They said, "Oh, you Israelis," not meaning me, but the Israelis over there. "You people, you know, you're so easy. You're so easy. You don't know what it was like before you came here. You don't know what King Hussein was like." They used to laugh back then because it was a very light administration, and there weren't a lot of police. You know, now of course it's a horror show, but that's what the peace process brought on. People always think the peace process is going to bring peace. No, the peace process often brings war. But people don't. People are just they don't get it. They don't understand how that can be, and because they weren't there, they don't know how peaceful it was after '68. And people there were very happy in a way because, you know, they were allowed to do their free enterprise. They didn't have police sitting on them. There were television sets going up everywhere, the television antenna. People were building onto their houses. Everyone was buying modern utensils and stuff like that. I was living on the West Bank, I know. Maybe we'll write it one day. My wife has a better memory of it than me, so maybe I'll let her write it, but she doesn't like to write. Anyway, I'll tell you another funny story. My wife used to go to work on a bus into Jerusalem from there and take another bus she worked on the Jewish Encyclopedia as a picture editor. And she used to watch this, some of the men would come on the bus with them, and they'd be all dressed in their keffiyehs and so on and so forth. The minute they got to the central bus station in downtown Jerusalem, they took off their keffiyehs, took off their whatever they were wearing, and they put T-shirts, short pants, you know, and they would just become modern sort of people. They'd go back, wrap themselves up, go back on the bus, you know, and so on and so forth. One day I was sitting in front of the post office downtown, you know, and everyone was on the East Jerusalem side, and the Israelis used to do a lot of hitchhiking back in those days, particularly the soldiers, and never provided for the soldiers. And there was this young girl in the army with a submachine gun and a short, you know, mini skirt sort of thing, you know, and so on. And all the Arabs who I was sitting with were like ogling, and I guess maybe I was watching her too, and they said, and we were talking, and they said, I forget how the conversation went, and they said something like, "One day we shall take all this back," or something like that. And I forget how it went, or they said, how shall we do? That was what the conversation was. How shall we take all this back, or when? And I said, "When your women look like that." And they said, "Never." And I said, "Well, you'll never do it then." But a funny conversation. Another conversation like that, when Hamas was born, I was in this antiquities dealer in the old city of Jerusalem. He was a very Hamas kind of guy. I didn't know what Hamas was at that time, but he was always telling me, there's a new party, and so on and so forth. I said, "Oh, interesting." And so he would tell me all about what was going on with this new party and what it thought. And so we got to one point, and we're talking about atomic missiles and weapons. And I said, "Well, you know, if you shoot off atomic missiles or weapons or things, you're going to get blown up too." And I'll never forget it. He said to me, "Fadlan means welcome, welcome, Fadlan, Fadlan, let them come, let them come." You know? So this is this is my introduction to Middle East politics, you see. You have to kind of live in some of these areas to get the feel for it, but I'm just telling you, Jimmy Carter is out to lunch, let me tell you that. You know, it's really sad, as is the Baker Committee and all these, you know, what expertise do any of those people have on the Middle East? Nothing. He just put a bunch of sort of drones on there that he could manipulate them all and do the same thing he did after the first Iraq campaign and mess the Kurds and Shiites up. And if you notice, the Kurdish leaders already rejected the Baker Committee plan as, you know, would totally undermine everything that we've accomplished here and everything that we've achieved. And that's the only peaceful place in Iraq. So yeah, what he's going to do is undermine the only place that there is any peace. Well, go on. Anyway, I don't want to go into all those things, but you know, just don't be deceived by all these things. Use your head if you possibly can, and maybe help others use their head. Well, what happened in 1937 was that the agitation began, led by the Mufti, and I told you the Mufti later was Hitler's advisor on the final solution. And he pushed Hitler. Now, I don't know, Hitler didn't need a lot of pushing, you say, but, you know, I'm not sure if this fellow actually went to Berlin, because he was thrown out of Palestine by the British for the agitation that was going on there and so on, that led to this Peel Commission. He went to Berlin and he was insisted that all the Jews be killed. That was his. This was his program. Now, whether the Nazis didn't want to do that anyway, of course, I'm sure a lot were interested in doing that anyway. But I'm sure to have a reinforcement sort of thing like that was very useful and encouraging to them. You go around the concentration camps and look at them, you know. And, you can maybe look up this individual. And I said Yasser Arafat is considered to be a nephew or something of his. That family is still very important, the Husseini family in Palestinian affairs. I'm not au courant where they are at the moment. Anyway, so this Peel Commission was a commission of the British, just sort of like the Baker Report, to see how we can solve this horrendous situation we've created for ourselves in Palestine. You know, maybe 15 years have gone by and both communities are in an uproar now, and you're getting Arab terrorism and so on and so forth. One other person that was functioning in this period was a person called Ord Wingate, who I dedicate partially my James book to because of the conversation I think I told some of you about. I won't repeat it in other of my classes that you may have heard. But Wingate was a young British officer. He was a nephew of a person called Sir Reginald Wingate, who had been the Governor General of the Sudan at the time of the following the Chinese Gordon events at Khartoum, when Chinese Gordon, famous British hero, went down to Khartoum and tried to withstand the Mahdi was having a revolt there. And there's been a movie about that too. I think it's called Chinese Gordon or something like that, the movie. Or Khartoum, maybe it's called Khartoum. Anyway, it's with I think it was with Charlton Heston, as I recall, as Chinese Gordon. But the Mahdi was supposed to be the sort of messianic return of Muhammad, according to Shiite Islamic theology of some kind. But the return of the Imam. Anyway, Reginald Wingate was the Governor General down there, and then this was one of his nephews. And he went to military academies, but he was homeschooled, and he was a part of an evangelical British group called the Plymouth Brethren. His parents were very, very religious, and he knew the Bible inside and out. And very colorful life, but he was in the Sudan originally, hunting down slavers there when he learned Arabic. He was distantly related to T. Lawrence. And then he went to Palestine because he knew Arabic and he had a lot of experience there. And he got the idea that because the Arab revolt was going on and they were sabotaging the oil pipelines, going to the Haifa refineries and things, that he would, he told the general there who was in command that he thought they should have, they should take advantage of the Jewish kibbutzes and organize Jewish night raiding squads. And they thought this was crazy, but he went to the kibbutzim and he showed them that he could do things better than they could as far as tracking the land and do all this stuff, and he laid the foundations for the Israeli army. He knew Chaim Weizmann and so on, and once he went into Chaim Weizmann's office and he said, go in, and this was after he'd been thrown out of Palestine during World War II. He used to always go to visit Chaim Weizmann in London, and he'd say, go into the Foreign Office and demand a Jewish army. He wanted to lead a Jewish army. That was even though he wasn't Jewish or anything, but he saw it in biblical terms. And Weizmann, I said to him, yes, that's maybe what you would do, pound the table and then walk out. He said, but I want to be able to go into the Foreign Office many times, not just once. So that's because Weizmann's approach very, very slow, and maybe that's the right approach, but not going to get a lot done with the British like that. Anyway, he was so successful that they threw him out of Palestine too and forbade him ever to come back, Wingate, even though he was a British officer. So they put him in some location up in northern England someplace, an artillery battery. And then when World War II broke out, he was sent down to Ethiopia. I think I told you about him. And he led Haile Selassie's irregulars to defeat the Italians in Ethiopia and put Haile Selassie back on the throne there. And he did that with kibbutz people that he had in Palestine. In any case, his first British victory in World War II. And then he was tried to kill himself in Cairo because they still wouldn't let him go back to Palestine. He wanted to, this was 1942, he wanted to organize the Jews into fighting units to fight the Germans, and he was refused. And he was so depressed, and no British officer ever tries to commit suicide, so we sent him out to the boondocks again. And then the officer in Palestine, who had originally sponsored his night raiding squad, was named Wavell, and he became the commander of the forces in India, the British forces in India. And the problem was the Japanese coming up through the Burma and those places. And so Wingate was, because he was an irregular fighter, became the youngest general in the British Army, he became a major general. He did the Chindit campaigns, famous guerrilla campaigns where you would drop supplies in front of your troops and you operate behind enemy lines. And he was the only one who had achieved any victories against the Japanese among the British at that time. And then he was killed in a suspicious plane crash in 1944 in an American crew, and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So that's just another person in this period of events around the Peel Commission, but it's interesting to read about him. The point is that at this point, the British were going back on the mandate. Most of the civil servants there were against the mandate, sympathized with the Arabs, and they wanted to stop it, so they held this commission, and that's where Weizmann breaks down here. He's giving testimony before the Peel Commission. That's where we left off last time. Bush, all this was for your benefit because you weren't here last time and wanted to fill you in on where we got to. They already heard all this stuff.
Sorry, guys.
So he says here, on page 584, we're told the mandate is a complicated document, but we were not its authors. The mandate was given by the League of Nations. But look, the blame doesn't lie with the mandate now being made the scapegoat. It lies with those who should have carried out the mandate with strength and dignity and not half-heartedness, doubt, and weakness. These are powerful words. And he mentions Faisal, you see, Emir Faisal. We could speak to. We could have settled things way back then with him. Now we have to deal with the Mufti, so I've explained to you who all these people are. Right? It's on page 584. With Faisal, and I told, we did this last time, he understood our aims and we could have had an accommodation. But not with the Mufti. It's like Yasser Arafat. Not one Jewish to enter the gates of Palestine. For him, there's only one Jewish gate. It's marked exit, not entrance. This is what's going on today. This is no different. This is 1937, and this is 70 years ago. Nothing has changed. Only the numbers have increased, and the lethalness of the weaponry has multiplied a millionfold. But nothing has changed. So, you know, what is the psychological limit which would satisfy the enemies of the, he only calls it a national hunt. So, he is upset. This is a breach of the promise made to us in a solemn hour. I say this, I who for 20 years made it my life work to explain the Jewish people to the British and the British to the Jews. What are they going to do here? Right in the face of Hitler, they're going to close the gates of Palestine. They're going to seal the fate of the Jews of Europe. And they do. And they do. They do. You say, no, it couldn't be. Oh, yes, 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 it could be, and it was. And say, well, you know, they didn't know. No, they have intelligence. They knew something of what was going on, what was coming. But the point is they were looking at their own political situation. Would Hitler have let the Jews go? Well, it didn't matter. Masses would have escaped through the leakage valve of Istanbul and onwards if they had an ability to go to Palestine. Even in 1948, if you've ever seen the movie Exodus, have you seen that movie? the British were stopping refugees from the camps from coming into Palestine. And they had to starve themselves on ships to get there. I was going to show you this movie called The Long Voyage Home, but yes, they had to starve themselves. It was called, you know, there was this huge thing, they wouldn't get off the ships. They finally sent this ship, which was run by an American volunteer crew, an old scow. They sent this ship back they were people from concentration camps, and they were on a hunger strike. The British killed a few of the Americans that were on the ship when they took the ship. There's descriptions of the fight that went on at sea to take this ship of immigrants from concentration camps. But this hit the headlines, so people were upset about this, and this is what, to some extent, brought about the partition of Palestine and the UN debate in 1947. This Exodus episode of the ship Exodus, the brutality that so the British were still even killing all those people. Everything didn't melt their hearts at all, not at all. And the Peel Commission was the commission where they took back their promises totally and sealed the gates under Arab pressure. I say to the mandatory power, you shall not, you see, they were told in the mandate that there was, the Balfour Declaration was attached to the League of Nations mandate. They were only given Palestine as a mandate. You shall not outrage the Jewish nation, you shall not play loose and fast and loose with the Jewish people. Say to us frankly, the national home is closed, and we shall know where we stand. But this trifling with a nation bleeding for 1,000 wounds must not be done by the British, whose empire is built on moral principles. That's a joke. That mighty empire must not commit this sin against the people of the book. Tell us the truth. This at least we have deserved. Here Weizmann breaks down and weeps and then continues after a pause. I've now finished my criticisms. If I've expressed them more sharply than I want, it's because, anyway, because I'm like that. Let's see. You can read the rest of this speech about the Mufti on page 586 and the past of the Arabs and so on. I consider, page 587, that two criteria have to be applied in apprising such a principle. You know, are you going to found in the previous page a Jewish state in a reduced area? The report of the Royal Commission contains a revolutionary proposal, that is to maybe partition, but they didn't do this. The first, does it offer for a genuine growth of Jewish life? I mean quality and volume, so he's always worried about the culture and so on. This is one test. For our great teacher Ahad who is with us no longer, he must have died in the meantime. It might have been the only one. But times have changed. Jewish history, which lasts for the most part is not ours to mold, face us with a tragic problem. Does the proposal contribute to the solution of the Jewish problem? A problem pregnant with danger, blah, 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 blah. So on. I told the Royal Commission at the bottom of the page, the hopes of 6 million Jews are centered on emigration. Then I asked, but can you bring 6 million to Palestine? There are about 5.5 million there now. I replied, no, I'm acquainted with the laws of physics and chemistry. I know the force of material factors. In our generation, I divide the figure by 3. And you can see the depth of the tragedy. 2 million of the youth with their lives before them who have lost the most elementary rights, the right to work, and so on. Well, pretty soon they're going to lose not just the right to work. 2 million, perhaps less, that's all I'm asking for. He quotes the Bible, a remnant shall survive. We have to accept it. We have to accept this. We can only do what's possible, and so on and so forth. That's his committee. It's very nice and very decent, but very, very weak. And, you know, you say, what else could he do? Well, I'll show you what else he could do. We'll read Jabotinsky now. This is the other side of the coin to Weizmann. Born in Odessa again, he's a fairly cosmopolitan person. And he was really 1880 to 1940. Pinsker came from Odessa, remember? I hear they're selling land now in Odessa real cheap and good investment. I told you it's a beautiful place. I told you that last week, and maybe it's a good place to invest if you have any money. His Zionism was of the Herzlian kind, Hertzberg says here. So it gives you more about how Jabotinsky in the First World War lobbied the British to raise a Jewish brigade. And he was able to get such a brigade into action. He, in 1920, after the first Arab riots that started to take place to protest the mandate, organized a self-defense corps. And immediately, not surprisingly, he and Chaim Weizmann were at odds. Weizmann trusted the British, Jabotinsky didn't trust the British. So you can read the rest of that there. I only have a footnote to that, as I told you last time. Netanyahu's father was Weizmann's was Jabotinsky's private secretary when he died in 1940. Now let's listen to what he says to the same Palestine Royal Commission, the Appeal Commission. I think this is a good way to bring this class to a quasi-conclusion. We'll say some more, but let's look at this because it's fairly long. I have the honor to represent here, this is a totally different mindset than Weizmann. He even speaks about honor, as you see. What is based on what I should call humanitarian aspect, but I do not mean to say we do not respect the other, the spiritual aspect, the rebuilding of Hebrew culture. That's a sort of nod to who? The Ahad. Creating a model community, that's what Ahad was interested in. But a model community of which the Jewish people could be proud. All that, of course, is most important. 1937, this is. But as compared with our actual needs, here we go. And our real position, so see, some people could see the situation clearly. They weren't fools. And our real position, remember the movie you saw about Hungary, in the world today, all that has rather the character of luxury. Look, that's all I've been saying myself. But he just says it at the time. And he is, how do we put it, pilloried, heaped abuse upon, ostracized because of this kind of speech. And yet, he's the only one here who's seeing anything realistically. He's not, confusing himself with high spiritual ambition, which has no place in the world of 1937. Nice, it would be nice if it did. The Commission has already heard a description of the situation of world Jewry, especially in Eastern Europe, and I'm not going to repeat any details, but you will allow me to quote a recent reference in the New York Times. Heather's already still quoting the New York Times back then, describing the position of Jewry in Eastern Europe as a disaster of historic magnitude. That's already in 37. I only wish to add that it would be very naive, and although many Jews make this mistake, I disapprove of it, it would be very naive to ascribe the state of the disaster, permanent disaster, only to the guilt of men, whether crowds or whether a government. The thing goes much deeper than that. Pinsker. And in some of the things I might have said to you. And I regret, but to say these things, this is not popular with my co-religionists, but the truth is the truth, unfortunately. And here he says it. We are facing an elemental calamity, a kind of social earthquake. So he knows. Herzl knows. He knows. But the others don't know. Tell us the truth. You must tell us the truth. And I'm going to break down crying. Is this man going to break down crying? No. Totally clear-sighted. Totally different individual. 3 generations of Jewish thinkers and Zionists, among whom there are many great minds. I'm not going to fatigue you by quoting them. 3 generations have given much thought to analyzing the Jewish position, come to the conclusion that the cause of our suffering is the fact of the diaspora itself. It's not the anti-Semitism of men, things, inherent xenophobia of the body social, the xenophobia of life itself. Xenophobia means hatred of foreigners. It's the fact of the diaspora itself. And Pinsker said that. See, he came from Odessa. The Jew is like a dead man walking. People, it's like an apparition. People, that was the way he put it. Anyway, but the best of governments could perhaps only soften the calamity. Next paragraph. But the core of the calamity is an earthquake which stands and remains. It is an earthquake. He doesn't have any doubt about it. He knows what's going on and what may be about to happen. Some governments, the Polish government in parentheses, have tried to bring to notice to the League of Nations and the whole of humanity that it's humanity's duty to provide the Jews an area where they can build their own body social. I have to bring you a picture of what the Jewish hell looks like, but I feel I cannot do it. I hope one day that some Jewish representative may be allowed to appear at the bar of these two houses, I guess it's Parliament, just to tell them what really is, and to ask the English people, what are you going to advise us? What's our way out? Or standing up and facing God and say that there's no way out, and we must go under. But unfortunately, I cannot do it, so I will simply assume the Royal Commission are sufficiently informed of this situation. Okay. So, Hebrew culture, perhaps even the second edition of the Bible, all this is nice, the model community, again, that's Ahad. But all this longing for wonderful toys of velvet and silver is nothing. And Jabotinsky was a classicist. He studied Greek. He translated Greek tragedy into Hebrew. But again, he dismisses the cultural Zionists in such a situation. This is like toys of velvet and silver. This is nothing in comparison with the tangible momentum of the irresistible distress and need by which we're propelled and born. We are not free agents. We cannot concede anything. We have nothing to concede. We can't give anymore. If I were Israeli government, that's what I would say. We have nothing to concede. We've already conceded 2 countries in this mandate. We're dealing with people who have 21 countries. They want more. They want our death. We have barely enough that we can survive. So if you people suffered a little bit in the dislocations, we haven't suffered in the dislocations. Whole communities haven't been uprooted in Yemen, in Iraq, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, and so on. And there's not a Jew left in Iraq, not one, when there used to be like over 250,000. And the same, and yet we still hear about the injustice of everything, you see? That's what I would say, like Jabotinsky says. Are you kidding me? Yes, there's suffering in the world, and we regret suffering. But he says we can't concede anything. We're a beggar. We have nothing to concede. We can only just barely survive. Whenever I hear the Zionists, most often my own party, accused of asking for too much, you see? There he goes. Gentlemen, I really cannot understand it. Yes, we do want a state, every nation, every normal nation, beginning with the smallest and humblest, yes, even like Ecuador, even, what have they contributed to what has Paraguay contributed to the world lately? Maybe Mozambique should have a state, and Madagascar, yes, sure they should, and who's to stop them? But all these peoples have states. What, we can't have a state, is what he's saying to them. That's the normal condition for a people. Yet we're the most abnormal of all peoples. Ask only the same conditions, we only ask what the Albanians enjoy. So nothing of the French and the English, and that's called too much. So he's laughing at them. And I think his attitude here is something that would bring honor to him in the eyes of the people listening to him. He's not afraid to stand up and say it outright, what he sees as the truth. Look, I should understand it if the answer was, it's impossible. If you said to me, no, it's impossible, you can't have this. Okay, but when the answer is, it's too much, you're asking too much, which is what we still hear now, worse today than before. After 3 wars and everything else, I cannot understand that Baker wants to throw in the Palestine problem as a sop for the Iraq problem. And what the Palestine problem has to do with the Iraq problem, I have no idea. The fact that Shiites and Sunnis are willing to murder each other in an unlimited amount of violence and murderousness, what's that got to do with, the Golan Heights, which he put in his report? It's the same thing. It's just the Peel Commission all over again. And with a prime minister like Ehud Olmert, you never know what's going to happen. But Ehud Olmert wouldn't be there without Sharon. And with Sharon in a coma, endless coma, who was it, Robertson said he was punished by God. A lot of people feel that way who believe in God in Israel and among the evangelical community for what he did in the Gaza Strip to those people. Maybe he wasn't, who knows? I have no idea what God has to do with any of this. But Pat Robertson expressed that, what a lot of Israelis feel, I can tell you that. In any case, Olmert wouldn't be there without this situation with Sharon. And if there were election today, Olmert would be gone and Netanyahu would be in. But the problem is not going to be an election now because they can hang on by making political deals for another 4 or 5 years. They just make coalitions and they give this person this little bailiwick and that person this bailiwick, and they can cobble together a coalition because Olmert hates Netanyahu. And Netanyahu basically is Jabotinsky without the eloquence. That's basically what Netanyahu is. He's a descendant of his father, who is a descendant in effect of Jabotinsky. But if you didn't know these things, you wouldn't be able to put these people in their context. Okay, basically you see Eisenman, you're saying the same thing. They are saying, yes, because I have a similar mindset to these people, I have to be frank. You can see that, I use other examples, and he uses the same example. He says the Albanians. I cannot understand that. I remind you, excuse me for quoting something from your own literature, he's a very literate person, that you're all familiar with. This is a very funny testimony. I'm going to quote to you something from Oliver Twist. I guess we're getting to the Christmas Carol this year. Around this time, we always get to the Christmas Carol. Dickens and so on. He wrote these other books, and he gives this example. The commotion of the famous institution when Oliver Twist came and asked for more, that is, more food on the table or whatever in this orphanage. He said more, because he did not know how to express it. What Oliver Twist really meant was this: will you just give me that normal portion which is necessary for a boy of my age to be able to live? I assure you that you face here today in the Jewish people with its demands an Oliver Twist who has unfortunately no concessions to make. What? You're going to close the gates of Palestine because of uproar here? What can be the concessions? We've got to save millions, many millions. I do not know whether it's a question of rehousing 1/3, half, or a quarter. I do not know, but it's a question of millions. That's what it is, millions. He knows. He knows what's coming, poor man. He died in 1940. Thank God for that. For him, he didn't have to witness what he knew was coming. Certainly the way out is to evacuate those portions of the diaspora which have become no good, which hold no promise of any possibility of livelihood. The situation has gotten dire since Herzl, actually. And the Weitzman types are well-meaning, but they are not able to really react in any way to it, and maybe their way is better, who knows? You have to judge that. I just don't like people unable to speak plainly. And to concentrate all those refugees in some place where they should not be diaspora. That's what Herzl was going to do, you see. It didn't matter where at that point, the situation was so dire. Uganda, wherever. Our demand for a Jewish, I am going to make a terrible confession. He doesn't even cover it over. That's what the Jews are still talking about. They're not going to accept the Palestinians coming back to so-called previous homes. We don't even know how many have actually originally come from there or not. But one of the things that in the negotiations for the peace process between the Palestinians and Israelis is the resettlement of the Palestinians back in Israel. One of the reasons that the Olmert party is giving up areas is that they feel that they're going to become a minority given the birth rates. So the demand, the problem is still as it was 70 years ago. Our demand for a Jewish majority is not a maximum, it's a minimum. We need a majority, not because we're anti-Arab, not because we're racist. We don't want to hurt the Arabs or anybody. We just know that if we don't have sovereignty over a place in the earth, we will not survive. That's it. That's what he's saying. It's just an inevitable stage if only we're allowed to go on salvaging our people. That's what Brandeis is saying. So the majority, It's not being a racist, as people like to portray it or so. It's, again, I frankly wouldn't even worry about that. I think that if everyone is constrained to the same conditions of life that you find in Israel, and I've been there and lived there, the birth rate comes down quickly because people have to pay mortgages and taxes and everything else, and they can't have the birth rates that they can have in different environments. But the country, you see, he doesn't agree with Eisenman. The point when the Jews will reach a majority in that country will not be the point of saturation yet, because with 1 million more Jews in Palestine today, you could already have a Jewish majority. There's not even 1 million Arabs there at this time. But there's certainly 3-4 million in the East who are virtually knocking at the door, asking for admission, asking for salvation. He says it, and what do the British do? Slam it. I have the profoundest feeling for the Arab case, insofar as their case is not exaggerated. That's the same today. This commission have already been able to make up their minds as to whether there is an individual hardship to the Arabs of Palestine as men deriving from the Jewish colonization. Are they being really harmed by this? Maybe they're upper classes, and that's what people don't realize. The Arab upper class felt maybe that they were losing their status. But the Arab lower classes were really happy with the immigration because their economic status was increasing by leaps and bounds. And that was what it was like on the West Bank when I was there. The only people complaining about Israel's presence on the West Bank when I was there in 68, 73 were the upper class. All the others were thrilled. We maintained they like labor unions. They even got, you would see down in the post office every week, they got large family allowances because the Israelis were being consistent about giving out large family bonuses for people who had large families. You could see all the Arab women lined up at the post office down in East Jerusalem taking large family bonuses, which is fine. That's the way a country should be. We maintain unanimously that the economic position of the Palestinian Arabs under Jewish colonization, owing to the Jewish colonization, has become the object of envy of all the surrounding Arab countries. Yes, that is true in 1937. So that the Arabs from those countries show a clear tendency to immigrate into Palestine. He's the only one who said it. And he's already saying it then. I have also shown to you already that in our submission there is no question of ousting Arabs. We don't want to oust anybody. On the contrary, the idea is that Palestine, here it is, on both sides of the Jordan, should hold the Arabs, their progeny, and many millions of Jews too. But the problem is they took the other side of the Jordan away from the mandate. What's presently Transjordan or Jordan, it was part of the mandate. Look at the maps from the League of Nations. What I do deny is that this is a hardship. It's not a hardship of any race, any nation. This man is extremely, again, it's me, of course, who thinks this. You don't have to think this. But you have to acknowledge he's very clear-minded. I may not agree with him. I don't see what you have to disagree with. He's very clear-minded. Oh, they hate this guy. The British hate him. The Jews hate him. The labor Zionists hate him. Becomes portrayed as a maniac. I can understand that. The British bar him from Palestine after this. Let's see. I can hardly mention one of the big nations having their states mighty and powerful who had not one branch living in someone else's state. In other words, you can have people living in, you can have extraterritoriality. That's only normal. There's no hardship attached to that. So when we hear the Arab claim confronting with the Jewish claim, I fully understand that any minority would prefer to be a majority. Sure. But, you know, they can be a minority in our country and we can be a minority in their part of things. There's no big problem here. And as I have just told you, and I didn't get it from reading him, but it's then just common sense. I would also prefer Palestine to be the Arab state number 4, 5, 6. No, try 2021. That I quite understand, but when the Arab claim is confronted with our Jewish demand to be saved, it's like the claims of appetite versus the claims of starvation. Anyway, the decisive point is the terrible balance of need. I now want to establish that this condition was perfectly well known, perfectly realized, perfectly acknowledged by the legislation responsible for the act known as the Balfour Declaration. They understood all these things then. And subsequently the mandate. The paramount question was Jewish distress. They all understood it. I was privileged to take part in our political negotiations with France, England, and Italy from 1915 to 1917. And I was also associated with others who conducted these negotiations. So you see, it's not Weitzman that the British gave anything to. There were many people who were talking to them. And I can assure you that the main argument mentioned in every conversation with the Italian ministers, with Mr. Del Casa in France, Lord Newton here, Lord Balfour, Lord Lloyd George, and with everybody else, was the argument of the terrible Jewish distress. So, especially keen at that moment in England, France, Italy, three liberal countries happened to be the allies of the Tsarist Russia. I need not describe, gentlemen of your generation, what it meant to an Englishman, and so on. It was the common talk everywhere, the feeling that something should be done to relieve this disaster, the feeling that the disaster was only an acute expression of deep-seated chronic disease, Pinsker. That was alive everywhere. I claim that was the spirit that created the Balfour Declaration. That was the zeitgeist. That was what the spirit was, the recognition that something should be done to save the people. I always thought before coming to England, next paragraph, that if a civilized country, a civilized government assumed to trust the mandate internationally under such conditions, with such implications, dealing with people who have so long suffered, so long hoped, and hopes are, after all, sacred to every Englishman, I expected that government to sit down and prepare a blueprint, a plan, how to do it. I guess the same as the Bush going into Iraq. There should be a blueprint, a plan. What's the next step? Whatever your interpretation of home is, homeland, you see, that was the issue. Promise, there should have been a plan, how to build it. What would be the implication of placing a country, quotes, under such administration, economic and political conditions as might facilitate the establishment of whatever you meant by the Jewish national home? That's what the mandate said, that it should be built up to provide this home. There should be a plan. And the second was that everybody, that was the trust that I've accepted and that we were going to do it. That everyone should know that once we had this plan, that they were going to do it. There should have been a geological survey of both sides of the Jordan. Well, I see he lays it out for them. There should have been, a reclamation and so on. And a parcelization and a reserve for both sides of the Jordan, which Jewish and Arab applicants for agricultural settlement could be satisfied. And guaranteeing of security. British, talking to a nation with your colossal colonizing past experience, surely knows colonization never went on without certain conflicts with the population on the spot, so the country had to be protected. That's what we're facing in Iraq today. Where's the plan, boys? And the Jew never asked to be protected by someone else. This plan should embody the Jewish man that they should demand that they should themselves be allowed to form a protecting body. That's why he always wanted a Jewish army. Jabotinsky, that's why people hated him, because he felt the Jews needed to defend themselves. Self-defense corps. They didn't want help from anyone else to do it. And so this is what everyone expected. I need not tell you how totally disappointed we were in hearing instead always the expression muddling through, in quotes. We always heard we're muddling through, hearing it even mentioned as something desirable and commendable as a kind of system. Muddling through. Or some would call it empiricism, or others would call it going by horse sense. I can only say we suffered greatly under the absence of such a system. We have suffered terribly. Whenever we complained, we got the strange reply. The man on the spot knows better. The administration there knows better. We'd go to London and complain, and they would say, the man on the spot. May I submit most respectfully that the mandate was granted to Great Britain by 50 nations, because those 50 nations believed in Britain's collective experience and conscience, and especially in the fact that their close control of the man on the spot. In other words, you're supposed to be an experienced government, and you can't even control the man on the spot. We continentals, I come from Russia, learned it from you English. But what was practically always their reply? We have appointed a man on the spot, let him do it, we'll wait and see. Or sometimes another reply. Probably the government is administered quite satisfactorily because both Jews and Arabs have grievances and complaints. So since both are equally displeased, we must be doing something right. I can never understand that point, Jabotinsky says, to me, this is a very rational man, Jabotinsky, but I may be nuts. It's my duty, for instance, with regard to my children, or with regard to my two clients, sufficient to discharge if I have managed to make myself obnoxious to both of them. I don't understand that logic. That both have ended up hating me, then for I've done a good job. We were terribly disappointed by the absence of a system, a plan. We were more disappointed by the absence of second requirement, clarity. The Arabs were never told what the Balfour Declaration was meant by Lord Balfour and all the others to mean. They were never told what it implied. Anyway, this has been the system from the beginning. Really interesting discussion here. And this is to a British committee. So different from, as you see, Weitzman. Let's see. In Palestine, we were threatened with pogroms, but the government kept cutting down the number of troops. And we tried to say, look, just like in Kenya, we have to defend ourselves. We have to have self-defense. And this he considered to be a holy duty. So the Jews have never been allowed to defend themselves in 2,000 years. And so people like him and Wingate. The problem was Wingate didn't seem to know this person. He only knew Weitzman. He would go to Weitzman all the time with his problems. If he had gone to Jabotinsky with his problems, there may have been a more appreciative acceptance of what he was trying to do. So this is our only piece by Jabotinsky, but you get an idea. It's a holy thing, self-defense. We had in our case to prepare 565 by underhand methods with insufficient equipment, with insufficient drilling in an amateurish way. I really do not know how a government can allow or tolerate such a state of things after 3 experiences. There were 1929 were terrible riots. I'm sorry if I get excited. I apologize to the committee and I hope they understand the reason for it. There were massacres in Hebron and places like that. If you cut the troops in Palestine far beyond the limit of safety, then you see parallels today in Iraq, and the explanation that the British taxpayer does not want to give his money nor his sons, that's quite natural. That's quite natural. But we, the Jews of all parties, have for years been demanding, why have you disbanded the Jewish regiment or the Jewish legion or the Jewish battalion? We'll take care of ourselves, just let us do it. Why not allow Jews to take over their own defense, our men and money under British command, under British military law? I do not claim a Jewish army before there was a Jewish state. We just want a regiment. We don't want Johnny, Tommy, Bobby to defend us. If in building Palestine sweat and gold have been employed, let us give the sweat and let us give the gold. If blood has to be shed, let it be our blood, not English blood. We're willing to do our part. So different than Weitzman. This is like the difference between a dreamer and a man. Man is a dirty word these days, I understand that. In any case, that's what I used to call it when I was young, a man. That was considered something really a compliment to some at one point in the old days. Anyway, I know the attitude of this commission refusing to dwell on the actual cause of the riots that have broke out in 29 and 37. I still ask, is there a plan? Is there a line of action? Mr. Eden, who later became Prime Minister in the 50s in Geneva, must formally, in so many words, promise the League's Council that a Royal Commission had been appointed, would investigate the facts. Where is then the Royal Commission which will investigate who is guilty? Because I claim somebody is guilty. Again, not like Weitzman. He doesn't ask them to tell the truth. He says somebody is guilty. I claim that a tremendous amount of ammunition for the Arabs has been allowed to percolate into Palestine. That's still going on now in Gaza. That's going on the West Bank in massive amounts. When I lived on the West Bank, there was no ammunition, nothing. Nobody was killing anybody. Nobody had guns. It's the result of the peace process. Pretty soon there'll be Iranian rockets and everything else, poison gas, whatever. Both before and during the events, I claim there was neglect of duty in examining first victims. I claim there is something I want to understand, but do not understand. In fact, while a general strike in Jaffa was in progress, there was no general strike in Haifa. I want to understand whether it is true that there have been some gentleman's agreement, a revolt by leave on one part of Palestine, but no revolt where it was requested. In other words, he says that the British people on the spot were colluding in this. They allowed revolt here, but told them don't revolt there. I want to know why such things happen in the country and nobody's guilty, nobody's responsible for murder and so on, and massacres. I've heard about the man on the spot, but I want him to answer for the errors. And he repeats Zola. I want sometimes to be able to say j'accuse, the thing that triggered Herzl. They are guilty of commission, omission, neglect of duty. Someone should answer to the Permanent Mandates Commission of the League of Nations for what's gone on here. Who's going to answer? I am informed that instead of the Royal Commission report of the events will be presented in a general way in the report of the Palestine Government of the League of Nations. The party whom we accuse will present it. They're the ones we're saying are guilty. The first is to find the guilty ones, the Mufti head of the Supreme Muslim Council. Also to inquire about the Supreme Muslim Council, or whatever the official description of that group of persons headed by His Eminence the Mufti and the other gentlemen. The government gave them a sort of diplomatic immunity, same as Yasser Arafat later, when he was doing all this terrorism. On one hand, they'd wink an eye at that, and they would go, and then Clinton would have him staying in the Lincoln bedroom. This same thing, there's no different then and now of the way things were happening. Let's see, where were we? The government negotiated with them. I submit most respectfully and humbly that some independent commission, independent of the colonial office, independent of the man on the spot, should inquire and investigate the question of guilt. I believe it is guilt. I believe that person is guilty should be punished. That's what I humbly demand. And as to the remedies, the main remedy, in my opinion, is the plan and the truth. Where's the plan? Tell the truth. Arabs and Jews should be informed what the real implications of the mandate are. To my way of thinking, there's only one way of interpreting the mandate, that is, facilitating the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. A scheme should be prepared. We call it a 10-year plan. In our opinion, it should embrace agrarian reforms, taxation, custom reforms, reform of the civil service, opening up of Transjordan for Jewish settlement, 2, an assurance of public security by the establishment of a Jewish contingent and by the legalization of a Jewish self-defense. Well, he's not going to get any of these things, obviously. And he talks about the Jewish agency. Just want to say one thing here. I'll finish up a break, but I just want to go you to the end here. Let's see. He says at the very end, he's interrupted here. I'll come back to this. I answer in the name of the most extreme Zionist parties. No, if you can't carry out the mandate, then give it back, he says. If Great Britain, page 569 at the bottom, it really is unable to do it, not unwilling, but unable, they can do it, but they're not willing to do it, we will bow to her decision, but we then shall expect Great Britain to act as any mandatory who feels it cannot carry out the mandate. Give back the mandate. That's what they did in 1947. And they didn't think people were going to accept the fact that they gave back the mandate. And Laurie Hammond, one of the commissioners, says, dude, he just ignores it. And do it in a way that will not harm the safety of the Jews who trusted you. I hope that time will never come, etc. I was the one in World War I who said, give soldiers to Britain, because I believed in her, and I still believe. And here's his punchline. But if Great Britain really cannot live up to the mandate, well, we shall be the losers, and we shall sit down together and think what can be done. But not that Great Britain should go on holding the mandate and pretend it is fulfilled while my people are still suffering in the diaspora and still only a minority in Palestine. No, that cannot be done. And then he uses their language with them. That is not cricket, gentlemen. Therefore, gentlemen, I submit it cannot be done and it shall not be done. I thank the Commission for very much for their kindness and attention. I beg your forgiveness for having kept you for an hour and a half. What's he saying there? It cannot be done and it shall not be done. He's right. threatening them, saying, it's not going to be that way. We're not going to let you do it. My party is not going to let you do this. It shall not be done. And that's what starts the terrorism, if you like, in Palestine. That's why they blame him. He tells them it's not cricket. He uses their own language. Well, this is quite a piece here. This piece is extracted from Jabotinsky. We'll go back and finish it up after the break. It's give you a good break here till 9, because we got some time here till 8:30, and we'll finish this up and talk about some final things, and talk about the exam, and do an evaluation, and we'll all go home and have a good sleep. How about that?
Sounds good.
Bet you never heard of Vladimir Jabotinsky before, huh? Huh? You have, huh? You're about the only. He's from Odessa, originally.